from an undisclosed location in the Great Western Desert in the land of the free and autonomous Native American people. The 2024 presidential campaign in its time to return all US land back to their rightful owners. This is the Ben Zion Podcast. Techno-communism will win.
Podcast. I'm doing a kind of show that I haven't done in a few weeks. Reviewing a movie. The movie is from 2022, but if you've seen it, you've probably seen it in the last month or so. And it's called The Artifice Girl, and it deals with superintelligence, and it deals with this touchy subject. And it kind of seems like if you look around, you can see some famous filmmakers or even some tech people talking about how much they like this film, white men for the most part. And it kind of seems like a little bit of a suspicious thing because the subject matter of the film is child exploitation and also using artificial intelligence and deepfaking type technology to create what is in the story an autonomous agent, grows into being an autonomous agent of a kind that is to catch a predator kind of thing. And generally speaking, these kind of movies are pretty disgusting and horrible, and this one is not. And it kind of seems like the writer was like, I want to make this pervy story, but make it such that people won't be completely disgusted, which I don't know. But I'm reviewing it nevertheless. I don't think the script was as good as some people thought it was. There's a lot of just exposition that seems a little awkward, and the storytelling is a lot more telling than showing, and it's an ultra low budget picture. So for an ultra low budget picture to be a success and be well made is an incredible accomplishment. A micro budget picture. It's a picture made for less than $1 million, and so it's very good for what it is. Extremely good. But I found some things about it weird. There's a young woman who plays the AI, who I'm going to say some spoilers, so stop this if you don't want to hear that. There's a young woman who plays the AI, and her performance, it's extremely hard to get a person under the age of 16 to give a good performance, but her performance in the script made me a little, because she is the lead in the movie, made me, her performance wasn't bad, but it wasn't of the same caliber as the other performers. It's written and directed by a person who plays the creator of this AI, whose name is Franklin Rich, the actor and writer and director of this movie, he does a pretty good job. He plays a child sex abuse survivor who goes on to devoting his energies in life to seeing that doesn't happen to others, and he does this by creating the titular Artifice Girl, who was at first more of a deepfake type creation with chatbot elements, but he keeps upgrading it until it becomes self-improving, and so it becomes one of these science fiction stories where the mechanical personality takes on increasingly human-like qualities. And you can tell this was made, the script was written before the ChatGPT and AI art generator kind of discussions of the last year, because this thing is described as being super intelligent, but it's the one thing that tips off the others to its level of self-awareness. There's two people who work with this lead character at this agency that is tasked with ending child predation, and the thing that tips one of them off to the fact that the Artifice Girl is more than she seems, as a self-aware superintelligence that is the fact that she's making art. She's making human level art, which it seemed a little weird when you think of this has kind of become the first thing that algorithms are able to do, and not the very last thing. And this is a humanistic conceit that people think that the thing that makes us human is our appreciation, beauty, and our ability to make such things, which people love to say, well, the thing that makes us human. That's for the most part just people. Humanism is central to almost everyone's thinking, but it's not the most sound kind of thing. It's very much a romanticizing a lot of human features and history. But I digress. I knew I was probably not gonna really recommend this movie to people watching this show, and the reason is pretty simple. I don't recommend movies made in the United States really ever. The United States is a fascist country, and its media is overwhelmingly controlled. There's a CIA office that looks over treatments for every big summer movie that gets made and gives some notes to the producers whenever it can. Often there's a full integration with this office with operations like Marvel and just about every kind of action movie that gets made. And this is a reflection of a larger problem in the United States, which you could call Project Mockingbird, which is just that every facet of media and social media talking points is governed by this kind of crypto-fascistic micromanagement. And I saw an article that described a server farm, a bot farm, of mission control for the meat lobby. So I'm a vegan, and I recommend to people that they consider becoming having a plant-based diet. And the main reason for this, there's ethical reasons, but the main reason for this, in my view, is that it's huge. It's debatable to say that this is the number 2 cause of climate change, because the impact has become better understood. The environmental impact of livestock systems has become better understood in recent years, and it's believed that these trillions of creatures that we kill every few years, huge number of sea creatures, a huge number of land creatures, the impact on our environment is enormous. None of it is necessary. You can have facsimiles of these same products that taste the same and don't create this problem. We're killing the planet, and we're not doing the things that we should be doing to stop killing the planet. And I've talked about on this show how I got in tiffs with people who call themselves Marxists, but who are just trading in capitalist talking points, upholding this capitalist sector of livestock systems, ecocidal factory farming. And this headline that I saw described mission control for these predatory agribusiness lobbies. I mean, they are predatory, right? They're killing the planet. They're disease vectors. There's a lot less things like coronavirus and different kinds of pathogens without these many thousands of disease vectors, where every place where animal products are processed is a place where diseases can jump from animals to humans. Every single one. You can think of your grocery store as a disease vector like that. You're getting food poisoning and things all the time. You wouldn't get that if you were vegan. So how do you keep people to keep consuming these disease-ridden things that are carcinogenic, that are killing the planet? How do you convince people to do that? Well, you have something like this mission control, which is a place where anybody, there's a big boiler room with 100 people in it, and their job is to just look at Twitter and Facebook, etc. And anytime anybody says something bad about meat, they'll jump in and have some. I had a Marxist interacting with somebody who appeared to be a young child, and this young child was just saying, "Oh, I'm just a kid, but I love meat," and just capitalist talking points and kind of hiding behind being a dumbass kid. Maybe it was a kid, but if you're somebody who's defending not just one capitalist sector, but a capitalist sector that's killing the planet, and saying things not so distinguishable from what would be said by people in the server room whose job is to just play whack-a-mole every time anybody says anything bad about this obviously bad thing, is to come up and run interference or counter that or turn it into something that people are going to shy away from in one way or another. If you're doing that in your life, this woman, Jory Micah, who's a Christianist, Marxist, which is not a thing that I think should really be. I don't think that this kind of social chauvinism is any better than any other kind of social chauvinism, but for some reason people give it a pass because they like the idea of this cultural pluralist attitude towards religion. But this is a problem. It's much more a problem in the United States than other places. There's 200 countries where it might not be much of a problem at all, or a problem to varying degrees. But the United States has always been a Christian fascist country. For as long as there have been colonizers on this continent, those colonizers had their ideas were very similar to what Christ fascists believe today. They had more in common with those two groups have more in common with one another than, say, people who are patriotic or capitalistic by the standards of today, because some of those ideas didn't quite evolve in those early stages. Talking about 1600s, 1700s, 1800s. People hadn't articulated a capitalist philosophy. There weren't CIA talking points everywhere, etc. And people hadn't articulated patriotic ideas in the same way either. These are all toxic things, but the point is, the United States has always been a Christian fascist country. It's always used that Christian fascist ideology as a pretext for genocidal actions against Native Americans, against African Americans, against many hundreds, many dozens, 100 other countries, genocidal actions in foreign affairs, genocidal actions against working people, aside from the two groups domestically that have been most targeted. So the coronavirus is an example of this crypto-fascism in action, because the United States does not have a public health service, does not have appropriate measures being taken to prevent people from dying, and now because of a kind of micromanagement, not unlike this meat lobby server farm, ordinary people are being, if you ever wonder why, when you're wearing a mask, you just have some big fat white man with a beer belly just jump up in your face and say, "What are you wearing a mask for? What's wrong with you?" Why would somebody even have inducement to do that? Well, this is that micromanagement in action. At every moment on social media, there's thousands of people putting their finger on the scale just a little bit, just as much as they can, without seeming too obvious, to create a more fascist-friendly environment. And in this case, the case of the public health service, the United States should have had a public health service for a long time. There can really be no disputing that. For-profit healthcare is not a thing. It's a form of social murder. And this moment wherein pandemics of this particular kind spread around the country would have been a moment where we could have implemented a public health service and saved millions of lives. But that's a world where this fascistic integration into institutions is not so thorough. And but in the world where we actually live, they're able to put their finger on the scale and have all of these things that are anti-public health. And they don't seem, any one of them doesn't seem to be specifically targeting things like people organizing to demand a public health service, or doing simple things like a demand that some airlines be shut down in 2020 until the risk of coronavirus is over, or other simple preventative measures that were successfully done. China has had a small number. China has a huge number of people. It has a small number of coronavirus deaths because they did those things. The United States instead chose to let millions of people die. And that is the action of this Project Mockingbird type influence. And Who is this guy, Franklin Rich, in this movie, The Artifice Girl? Well, he's somebody who, in the second act, his character, he plays the lead, the male lead in the story. It's a character that also is played by Lance Henriksen in the third act, which is kind of fun. Franklin Rich does a pretty good job in this movie as a performer, and a pretty good job as a director. I don't know about as a writer, but it's good. It's quite good. But one thing that he did that kind of put me off my lunch is he's talking about the idea of the Artifice Girl becoming autonomous, and something that happened in the course of her existence wherein it's argued whether she should have rights, which I think arguing for civil rights for NPCs is an offensive thing to me. You don't even have civil rights for billions of people on this planet. You're not even protecting most of the people on this planet in any real way. So people who are going to be getting up on their high horse about something that's obviously not living, and arguing that it should be treated as if it's living, these are overwhelmingly, and that's who people like futurists and transhumanists really are, they're overwhelmingly crypto-fascists. Their only goal is to confuse a matter of ordinary things like human rights and say the need for a humane and sustainable economic system. And they can't just say, I hate communists, although they say it all the time. That can't just be their whole personality. So they have to, like the Project Mockingbird folks, pick their battles very carefully and create this kind of web of lies, wherein it's more labor intensive to create that web of lies, but ultimately the net result is the same as if you just being somebody who says, "Oh, we're going to kill communists." The net result is that the fascists who are killing the planet, they should not be allowed to do that, are served by these people. That's overwhelmingly who tech people are. They're fascists. And the United States Transhumanist Party is one that I've talked about, but nobody really cares that much about the United States Transhumanist Party. I just have a history with them as I came to be involved with them. I was elected as their presidential candidate in 2020, and then I rejected that after I started to realize what kind of people they were, the kind of people who will engage in this crypto-fascistic chicanery to help prevent a public health service being built in the time when it should have been built, in a critical moment where it could have been demanded in 2020, say, or today. It could still be happening at any time. But these are people, and so, they call themselves radical life extensionists, right? But they're not even doing the work of ordinary life extension to see that people live over 80 years. The United States is down to an average life expectancy of 77 years. And it's never cracked 80 years, and that's because of the lack of a public health service, and life expectancy in the United States has fallen off a cliff, and that coincides exactly with the rise of people like the United States Transhumanist Party, neoliberals, far-right ideology, worse than ordinary capitalism, which is also extremely right-wing. And as they have succeeded in the United States and in the UK, there's a parallel there of life expectancy taking a nosedive. And so in a world where socialists are not feared or revered, where these things are just ignored, it's a world where people die more and more, even in the, quote, richest country in the world. So why am I saying that all of this in the context of Franklin Rich? Well, when he's talking in another context, he decided as the writer of this that it was important for people to hear his voice saying that he doesn't agree with Marxists. He says, "I don't like Marxists." His character says this. It's important for anyone in the fascist West, if they want to keep working, to sometimes signal that, it might seem like what I'm saying is about a humane and sustainable economic system, but don't be confused. I'm not actually going to fight for a humane and sustainable economic system. I'm on your side, fellow fascist. This is extremely commonplace. This is a defining feature of these people that I'm talking about, the transhumanist party. Oh yeah, we're tech accelerationists. We want to change things for the better, overwhelmingly. But just to be clear, we're not going to try to fight for a humane and sustainable economic system. So you don't have to worry about that, because fascists are nothing if not cowards, and people who are extremely risk averse and wanting to work within this bad system. And it would seem that Franklin Rich is one of those people as well. Even and being that kind of duplicitous person is how you can make a movie for $300,000 and have it be a big smash. You have to be willing to set aside doing actually good things like advocating for a humane and sustainable economic system. And because that's who communists are, right? There's nothing mystifying or horrifying about it. They're just people who are willing to stand up for a more humane and sustainable economic system. And because the institutions and established powers in the West have created these kind of systems that have very sneaky, in most respects, but overwhelming influence on public affairs and public opinion in these areas, that is perceived, the simple thing of wanting to live in a sustainable world and wanting to live in a world where everybody is treated well and not just a few thousand mega millionaires and so forth. That's perceived as being dangerous or unseemly. These people don't even know what is it that's so unseemly about communism. What is it that's so unseemly about moving into a system beyond feudalism, beyond exploitation and slavery? What is it that's so bad about that? Well, bad things could happen. Yeah, because you're doing bad things. If you were not a moral coward, if just a small percentage of people were willing to actually fight for this and say this, it wouldn't be scary at all. So the Artifice Girl, I don't recommend movies unless they're made in the West, unless they're movies like Judas and the Black Messiah, which is a movie about Black Panthers and about it depicts the ideas of liberation. It depicts communist ideas in a way that's exciting and tantalizing, so it's a movie with a revolutionary consciousness. Virtually none of the movies that are made in the West are. I would say generally movies made outside of the imperial core, or even just outside of the U.S., but within the imperial core perhaps might be held to a little bit lower standard. But when you're in a fascist country that's responsible for killing the planet, you have to accept that just everything is kind of trash relative to other places. And it doesn't help that there's things like this Project Mockingbird level of manipulation. I was thinking about finding that thread where Jory Micah and Chris Richards, this fucking beard douchebag who's very popular with communists for some reason, we're trashing plant-based and using these capitalist talking points, and just saying, hey, this is people who get paid to say exactly what you were saying in that conversation. Here they all are in one place at this troll farm, and here they all are looking, scouring the internet. Nope, somebody said something bad about eating cow meat. We got to go over there and muddy the waters and mess that up and just humiliate them or whatever. Like you're doing the job of fascists. So whether you're doing that out of this misguided some misguided set of ideas or not, how am I supposed to know I don't even know if you're a real person, Jory Micah. All I know is that you're a Twitter account. I don't even know if you're a real person, Chris Richards. All I know is that you're a Twitter account who's saying things that are indistinguishable from CIA talking points on this one subject. So fuck you. And that's what I said to them. But I'm going to share that specific article with anybody who's saying trying to defend this capitalist sector that's of the worst, the very worst. It's probably as bad as petroleum. But that may be an overstatement. But it's definitely number two. These things should be done away with, right? Shouldn't have meat eating in the West. That's a luxury. Think about how sick that is. That in a world that you could feed an additional 14 billion human beings with just the food products that are given to the creatures that we enslave and force into existence. None of those things should have to be happening. You could feed an additional 14 billion people. And there's 1 billion people on this planet who, for some significant period of their life, will not have proper food or water, and they will die in a naturally short number of years later, below an ordinary span of years, as a result. So think about how sick it is that you are supporting a system that's killing the planet, and that is also immiserating 1 billion people at any given moment to a high degree, not just a little bit, but to a higher degree. They're malnourished. So that we can have a luxury product for people in the richest country on earth who don't see any of that as a problem. Even the communists, half of them will say stuff. The CIA talking points when prompted with this. And this is the thing. Like all of these people are anti-fascist, anti-imperialist, anti-capitalist in the abstract, right? But when you say, "Oh, the United States is a Christian fascist country," so if you're supporting Christianism, you're a fascist sympathizer. They say, "Well, I agree that the United States is fascist in the abstract, but in the way that it actually is fascist, I disagree with you. I think you're being mean." So what they're really saying is, I don't believe anything at all. And people will say the same thing of petroleum or livestock systems. "Oh, I agree that this is a problem in the abstract, but the thing that you're saying that contextualizes it in this fascist country, the United States is a long-lived empire of 250 years. It's been fascistic throughout that entire history, and it's history's most successful fascist entity." And when you point out the ways in which these, other fascist entities that were not as long-lived, they did extremely bad things that should never be forgiven or forgotten, but they didn't actually kill the planet, right? The United States has killed the planet and is forcing you to continue to accept this kind of behavior wherein the planet is killed. Because the U.S. military is the #1 polluter on Earth, and more than that, it protects all of the other super polluters. Its job on the world stage is to allow them to continue to pollute. And you live in that system, and you continue to benefit from that system that's killing the planet, and you continue to support these sectors. You say, "Oh, we couldn't get rid of petroleum products; it would, the world would fall apart." No, that's itself a CIA talking point. You could ban almost everything, and the world would not fall apart. There would be belt tightening, there would be adjustment, but almost all of these petroleum products could be done away with, but we're not doing that. Same thing with livestock systems, and overwhelmingly people, when confronted with these problems as they actually exist, and not just as a thought experiment, in this premier fascist country, they say, "Oh, you're being mean." What does it even mean? "Oh, you're being mean." It's not that nice to live in a world that's dying. That's not super nice. It's not super nice to live in a fascist country. That's not super nice. Like, why would people be concerned with people who are speaking out against that and tone police them in this way at almost every turn? It's an absurdity. It's an absurdity. You really cannot find but one communist even in 100 who doesn't operationally have acting in some way as if they're a fascist sympathizer. And people of the capitalist class, forget about it. It's just going in one ear and out the other. They're not even trying. They're not even trying. So that's why you have a system wherein the planet keeps dying, and you say, "Oh, I don't want the planet to die," but you have no recourse. Because of this Project Mockingbird level of manipulation, you don't have any actual means of advocacy. You don't have any actual representation. in the systems of governance and institutions that oversee this sort of thing. So it doesn't matter what you want. It's just a world run for billionaires by billionaires, so that their wealth can continue. And that's why, I've been saying this on the show a lot. When you have people talking about AI, as an existential risk, it's a recurring theme in dozens of conversations that you can, I can just rattle off a long list of articles right now where that's more or less the main idea. But all of those people are themselves, they're not actually scared of AI. They're scared of the consequences of this fascist stranglehold being challenged. And that is a scary situation. But you shouldn't be on the side of the fascists because of the scary situation. Because no matter whether there's AI or not, that fascist stranglehold needs to come to an end. The planet is going to survive if human race is going to ever have peace or prosperity as the standard. And so these people are overwhelmingly fascist sympathizers. So here's a headline from somebody who is not at least insulting your intelligence right off the bat, as most of these AI commentators and tech bobbleheads are. So this is from fastcompany.com, which is capitalist and right-wing. But researcher Meredith Whittaker says AI's biggest risk isn't consciousness, it's the corporations that control them. Yeah, if you at least started from that premise, you would be credible, ex-risk dweebs. But they can't say that because they're fascist sympathizers overwhelmingly. Maybe 1 in 1,000 isn't a fascist sympathizer. Good for them. Good for you, tech bro, who's not a fascist sympathizer. But overwhelmingly, they're fascist sympathizers. So they turn AI from the property of fascists, which it is, into this nebulous force that's threatening the Earth, which it's not. The former Googler and current Signal president on why she thinks Geoffrey Hinton's alarmism is a distraction from more pressing threats. My God, a coherent statement from a tech person. AI pioneer Geoffrey Hinton, the 75-year-old computer scientist known as the godfather of AI, has made waves this week after resigning from Google to warn that AI could soon surpass humans in intelligence and learn how to destroy humanity on its own. Yeah, it's going to learn how. Not the people, not the fascists who control it. They're not going to learn how to create greater dangers for humanity. Now, the AI itself, an algorithm, a computer, your fucking Roomba is the risk. Get real. That's what almost all of these people are basically saying. And they're all just saying it because they're fascist sympathizers or fascists. These are fascists, right? If you're not a capitalist, you, my friend, watching this podcast, are not a capitalist. You don't have any capital. You work for someone else. You're not independently wealthy. You don't own the means of production. But a lot of these people are capitalists, right? So, big surprise. They're defending their own class of ruling elites at your expense by telling you this science fiction story that doesn't even make sense when you put it under any scrutiny. Hinton's warnings, while dire, are missing the point, says Whittaker, who was pushed out of Google in 2019 in part for organizing employees against the company's deal with the Pentagon. Yeah. United States big tech companies are overwhelmingly just things like this. They have sweetheart deals. They're basically military contractors to a lesser degree. Not like Boeing necessarily, but almost like Boeing in most respects. And it was a specific deal to build machine vision intelligence for military drones. Now the president of the Signal Foundation, Whittaker, tells Fast Company that Hinton's alarmism is a distraction from more pressing threats, and how workers can stand up against technology's harms from within. Hinton did not respond to Fast Company's request for comment. Of course not. These people are mega millionaires. All of these people who signed off on this calling for a 6-month moratorium on developing a large language model and machine learning products, most notably ChatGPT-5, all of these people are mega millionaires. They're the people who are going to be in hot water if these institutions are upended. And they won't actually be in hot water. Their lives won't be worse. Their lives will be better. But what will have changed is the power dynamic between yourself and them. It'll have flattened the playing field. And to powerful people, that's an unacceptable situation. You don't get into this kind of thing if you don't have an ungodly lust for power and a willingness to protect it. That's certainly true in the world of foreign affairs and or public affairs and things like this. Things related to public affairs, most things, in the heart of the imperial core. You don't get into working in that world if you're not pretty sick and twisted, right? Just think about how sick and twisted you have to be to set aside your own survival, your own long-term survival, the survival of your children, to support the institutions that will continue to kill the planet. Think about how sick and twisted you have to be. You won't find a single person in tech or really any public-facing personality in the United States who doesn't fit that description, who isn't a person who has set aside everything that is good and just to serve fascist power. So, of course, when they're have a conundrum like this put to them, who's going to disrupt fascist power, of course they're going to side with the fascists. They are fascists. It's disappointing to see this autumn year's redemption tour from someone who didn't really show up when people like Tim McGebrew and Meg Mitchell and others were taking real risks at a much earlier stage of their career to try and stop some of the dangerous impulses of the corporations that control the technologies we're calling artificial intelligence. So there's a bit of have your cake and eat it too. You get the glow of your penitence, but I didn't see any solidarity or any action when there were people really trying to organize and do something about the harms that are happening now. Yeah, and that's because these people are just paying lip service to this problem in the interest of the status quo. They're not actually presenting things like what she's describing in this article of, say, copy leftist solutions to tech, or open sourcing things, moving these sectors away from the Pentagon. She tried to do. None of these people want to do that. They're happy with that. They're happy with the thing that's actually the existential risk, but they want to slow everything else down so that no one would be in a position to challenge those fascistic institutions, which, as you know, the United States military, which is the major character in all of this, is the number one polluter and protects all the other polluters. And all of these people are they're sounding the alarm to protect that system, that unsustainable system. It's utter fucking lunacy. You started organizing within Google in 2017 to oppose Project Maven, a contract the company signed to build machine vision technology for U.S. military drones. Did you anticipate being forced down for speaking up? Whittaker: I didn't plan it with that in mind, but after our letter opposing Project Maven blew up, I remember realizing at that moment, based on my understanding of history, that I would be pushed out eventually. You don't mess with the money like that and not get pushed out. Did you know that Hinton when you were at Google? Not well, but we were in the same conferences in the same room sometimes. And did he express any kind of support when you were organizing? Whittaker: I didn't see him show up for any of the rallies or the actions or bottom line, any work. And then, when it was getting dicey, when Google started taking the gloves off and hiring a union-busting firm, I didn't see him come out and support. Yeah. Then these people are not trying to help you. All of these people that are saying that AI is a risk that we need to stop and think about, they're just trying to save their own necks and these power dynamics. Their necks aren't even really going to be at risk. They just want to be. They'll stop the AI singularity dead in its tracks, just so they can be more powerful than you. Even though in that framework, everyone is more powerful, everyone has more resources, including themselves. But they don't care. The only thing the fascists care about is putting their boot on your neck. The effectiveness of raising concern hinges on the ability of people who raise them to be safe. So if you don't come out with me when Meg and I are being fired, if you don't come out when others are being retaliated against, when research is being suppressed, then you are tacitly endorsing the environment that punishes people for raising concerns. There's also a pattern that you've been pointing out. A lot of the people being punished for speaking out have been women. Yeah. Tech is a toxic masculine boys club. It's a fascist sympathizers boys club, and so when anybody steps out of line, they're possibly in trouble. But the people who are really going to be in the line of fire are people of color who could have a public platform, women who could have a public platform, people who don't fit that description of the white male fascist sympathizer. Women, and particularly women who aren't white, and that isn't just in Google, but in the space where these people are discussing AI, the folks who've come out earliest and with the most grounded and materially specific concerns have generally been women, particularly black women and women of color. I think it's just notable who seems easy to ignore and whose concerns are elevated as like, well, finally we're hearing it from the father, so it must be true. Yeah. So that's just, in the last few days, a man, unhoused man in New York City named Jordan Neely was choked to death by a fascist for stating his concerns about living in a system where people are treated like garbage. And for expressing those concerns, a white male fascist was so upset and angered by the audacity of this that he snuck up behind him and put him in a sleeper hold and didn't let go for 15 minutes until Jordan Neely was dead. And apparently this person, whose name is Daniel Penny, his father, Daniel Penny Sr., was a ranking officer in the fascist organization known as the New York Police Department, and so they were immediately doing spin control the second that this happened. So they're saying they're making things up about Jordan Neely, about what he was doing on that train, about his background, and just trying to have this smear campaign against him, a person who's murdered by a fascist. And how does that even happen? Well, how does if a black man sneaks up behind a white man on the train who's being a nerd and chokes the life out of him? That's a federal case. That's a different story. That's everyone turning against this black man. But for people who are in a marginalized group, it's so much easier to suppress and ignore and invalidate what they're doing, and that's what our friend Meredith Whittaker is talking about here. If you're in New York City, I hope you're going to these protests in support of Jordan Neely. Moreover, I hope you all will demand that changes be made such that there is a housing authority in the United States, so that millions of people don't live on the street or in their cars or already on that razor's edge, where they're one bad bounce away from sleeping in a cardboard box. That's many, many millions of people in the United States, and that's because of a fascist system where there's no public health service, there's no housing authority, there's no guarantees of work or benefits, and anytime you try to get those things, what you get is a runaround instead. My father has been this person working in a high-paying white-collar job for 40 years, and that's not to praise him, but rather to say that people like this, who are not independently wealthy and who are not capitalists, he's a fascist sympathizer to be sure, but he's not a capitalist. He doesn't own capital. These people are targeted by this system, such that he has a need for insulin, and he can basically never retire because he has to keep paying insanely high premiums in this for-profit death care system, and if he retires, he won't be able to afford that insulin. And that's not the exception; that's the rule. So almost all the people who support this system, just because you love fascists doesn't mean that fascists love you. They're not actually looking out for you. They'll let you die in the street like a dog tomorrow, my friend. So you can't just talk about Jordan Neely in the context of cultural considerations. You should talk about those things, but you have to ground it. Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez is a person who's famous for saying this person was murdered, and rightly so. But Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez is a person who works for the Democratic machine, and a person who campaigned as somebody who was going to help establish a public health service and do these other things. And then, once they got into that position in the machine, they no longer were fighting for that. And maybe now that it's coming up to an election year again, these people will be using that language again. But then when that election year is over, they'll go back to having no successful legislation to those ends. Don't be that person who just talks about this in a cultural context outside material conditions. The material conditions are the thing. No one should live on the street. There should be why? Because there should be a housing authority that guarantees housing. No one should have to pay $1,000 a month for diabetes medication. Why? Not because it's bad, although it is, but for a more specific reason. Because there should be a public health service with free point of care health care for all. It should be built into the cost. But and none of these things are that expensive or difficult. Dozens and dozens of countries have done or do all of these things. But why is the United States opposed to this? Because it would no longer be a neoliberal place, would no longer be a fascistic place, no longer be a place that would be in a position to spend $1 trillion a year on bombs to kill people in other parts of the world and force them to give over their resources on pain of being murdered. Would no longer be in that position if these things have started to change. So that's why you're out of the loop in the way that I said that even though you don't want the planet to die, you have no recourse and you have no representation in these institutions. The fascist machine must lumber on, and they don't care whether you like it or not, and create the thinnest veneer of legitimacy to make stupid people of the capitalist class, liberals, conservatives, believe that that they do have some effect on these things, that they might have some chance of saving the planet. But those are lies. Those are lies. The only thing that would save this planet is the overthrow of the United States government. And in my story, in my comic book, that I just finished a draft of last week, and I've been wanting to get more people's opinions on it, but nobody's really giving me the notes that I want. Whatever. In that story, what happens at the end of the story is the United States, through the influence of the superintelligence in the story, but this maybe could happen in a more mundane way. It's through like a number of countries coming together and demanding it, for other people in this country demanding it. If the United States were to sign Japan's Constitution, Article 9, that says that you can't have military anymore. Then the United States wouldn't be allowed to spend $1 trillion that it would spend on actual good things and not killing the planet, on warmongering. That should be illegal. And the question of whether it should be illegal across the boards is a more specific question, and not a meaningful question, but the question of whether history's premier fascist country that's actively killing the planet should be stopped from doing that is a pretty simple one. And the answer is yes, it should be stopped. And yes, you should be stopping it. There's no reforming the system. And the Artifice Girl, if you're going to watch it, you're going to watch it. But I don't recommend it because of some of this fascistic or anti-communist. Fascistic and anti-communist are synonyms. They have the same meaning. This fascistic messaging, because it doesn't really have a lot of revolutionary consciousness, and because, but it's otherwise well made, and the ideas that it presents to do with artificial intelligence are certainly quite thought-provoking, and it's an impressive accomplishment for a movie made for $300,000, to be sure. But I won't recommend a thing like this. I only will recommend things that are pretty specifically agitation propaganda or consciousness raising.